Hello from INSEAD's Abu Dhabi campus. My name is Vikas Aggarwal. I'm a professor of entrepreneurship here at INSEAD, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to our latest In the Case series. This particular one is special. This is our first hybrid event. We have folks here in Abu Dhabi as well as online, and so we're looking very much forward to making this an engaging discussion with all of you. The webinar is called Break or Turn, the Case of an Online Car Marketplace at the Cusp of the Pandemic. And it's a pleasure to welcome Tarek Kabrit, CEO and founder of Seez, as well as Philip Bahoshy, who is founder of MAGNITT. So the In the Case discussions are live case discussions that are meant to be deep dives into recent cases published by INSEAD, together with the case protagonists, industry experts, and these are typically presented by INSEAD faculty. INSEAD, of course, is a leader in case publishing. We publish about 70 or 80 cases per year, INSEAD, authored by INSEAD faculty and staff. And these cases span a wide spectrum of topics on global digital transformation. For more information, you can see our website at digital.insead.edu. And just want to mention also that this series is generously sponsored by Accenture. So let me kick off by introducing Philip Bahoshy. So Philip is CEO and founder of MAGNITT, which is a data platform for investors and startup founders in emerging markets. Philip has an MBA from INSEAD in 2013, and prior to that worked at Barclays and Oliver Wyman. And Philip will be giving us an overview of the startup ecosystem in the Middle East and talking a little bit about some of the results from their latest survey. So Philip, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me today. It's a real pleasure to be at INSEAD as always, and apologies I can't be there in person. For those of you that may not know, thank you very much for the introduction. MAGNITT is the leading venture data platform for the emerging market space. Our focus is specifically the Middle East, Africa, Turkey, Pakistan, and soon to include other geographies like Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. And what that allows us to do is really benchmark and identify trends that exist in the venture capital space in those markets. And for those that are aware of this space, it's been a record year globally. You are seeing more venture capital investments in startups at a global level, specifically in the US and Europe, according to a podcast, which I highly recommend, called All in VC. Recently, they were saying not only is it a record year of capital, but it's also a record year of liquidity events, i.e. exits and companies being merged and acquired. And this is extremely positive. But when we specifically look at the regions that we're focused on in the emerging market space, you can see from these numbers that at a capital level, which is the high level number, you're seeing records amounts of capital being deployed in each of these geographies, even despite a slight drop in the number of deals that you're seeing here in the MENA region. And I think that's a trend that you've continued to see across this place. Here, aggregating the actual capital that's being deployed when aggregating each of these geographies, you can see that the capital is one that is almost 3x the total amount of capital that was being deployed last year, albeit less deals, but we still have 3 more months to the end of year. Basically, investors at a high level in terms of investor sentiment have gone from a risk-off environment back in 2020 to a risk-on environment back into 2021. You've seen mega deals across the board. You can see there alone in Turkey, there have been several deals in companies like Trendyol, in Getir, of over $500 million. Here in the MENA region, there has been a record amount of mega deals that we classify deals greater than $100 million, including deals by SoftBank in the likes of Uniphonic and Kotopi, showing not only signs of growth in venture capital in the region from local investors, but international investors as well. And that trend has actually grown throughout the whole of the year. Here, 3 specific graphs, starting with the MENA region on the left-hand side, Turkey at the top, and Pakistan at the bottom, have shown very similar trends in terms of capital deployment. In Turkey and Pakistan's case, 4 consecutive growth quarters of venture capital deployment. In MENA, Q2 was a record amount of capital that was being deployed, slightly lower in Q3, but as you can see, both of which were higher than any historical amounts. When you look at specific geographies, some interesting trends begin to apply. Pakistan has now crept into the top 5 geographies that we currently monitor. In the end of year report that we'll be publishing in January, we'll also be including the likes of Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa. But for now, Turkey, which has really seen the largest growth in terms of number of transactions, ranks first. But even when you look at the MENA region, where Egypt, UAE, and Saudi Arabia are the 3 leading hubs, the discrepancy between Egypt and Saudi Arabia is now hardly 5 deals, which if you went back almost only 2 years ago, the discrepancy was that of about 30 transactions. When you look at the capital deployment, Turkey leading the way. Again, when you speak to local investors in the Turkish ecosystem, this is very much driven by FDI investment coming from European entities, supporting the Turkish ecosystem. Pakistan seeing the second largest year-over-year growth in terms of capital deployment. But again, in the MENA region specifically, the UAE seeing the largest share of capital, albeit a slight drop in the rank to Turkey. And Egypt and Saudi Arabia, again, neck and neck in terms of capital deployment for the startups, all of which is highlighting a healthy ecosystem that exists here in the region. Few other trends that we look at a high level is the concentration of capital. So these reflect the top 5 deals in the region by capital as a percentage of all transactions. And what you can see in the MENA region is while the top 5 deals were quite considerable, they only represent 42%, showing diversification across the rest of the range in terms of capital deployment. Whereas in Turkey and Pakistan, the top 5 deals alone account for 84% of all capital deployment in Turkey and 62% in Pakistan. So relatively highly concentrated toward these mega deals. Another very interesting metric that we look to try and measure is the participation of international investors. And what I can say for the MENA region, and I'll come on to this later, is that there are more individual institutional investors making investments in MENA-based startups than we have ever seen before, with the largest participation, close to 40%, coming from international-based investors. We've already seen the likes of Sequoia Capital, SoftBank, as I mentioned, Tiger Investments, Naspers, and the likes, making investments in the MENA region, and this trend continues to grow, showing further maturity in the ecosystem. In Pakistan, it's almost 80%, albeit that many local GP domiciled investors are actually located offshore. When we deep dive into the MENA region a little bit more, again, we've seen that it is a very strong year. Not only has 2021 surpassed in total capital, it is the strongest year that we've seen in any previous year. What we have seen, though, is a slight drop in the number of transactions, which can be related to the fact that accelerator programs, a program that really helps drive early stage investment, have been less active in the last year due to the COVID pandemic, which has resulted in a slight drop off in the number of transactions at very early stage. Having said that, we have seen this graduation of the number of deals at bigger rounds than we have seen historically. For those that have been in the ecosystem a while, you always spoke about the likes of Kareem and Soup, who saw these mega deal transactions in the region. Now you are seeing a new generation of companies that are commanding higher rounds of investment and higher investment valuations than have previously been seen. And when you look at the likes of the individual investors, as I mentioned, the likes of your SoftBanks, you're seeing the IFC participation, even Endeavor Catalyst internationally, showing a real mix of the type of investors that are active in this space. And this has all led to a real acceleration and growth in both the mean and median deal size of rounds at every single stage of investment. Also, as a result, the equivalent increase in the valuations of each of these companies. When you look specifically at the MENA region in terms of geographical breakdown, stripping out the Pakistan and Turkey effect, you do see the same 3 hubs of the UAE, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia consolidating their positions, but you have seen the likes of Jordan, Kuwait, and other GCC countries coming and increasing their share of market. And the same can be said when you look at the number of transactions that are happening in this space. Industry-wise, though, it's very interesting to see that fintech has become the standout industry for investment by the number of transactions, a similar trend that we've seen across all of the different emerging market spaces. Historically, e-commerce, transport, and logistics were the two standout industries, those that basically tried to solve solutions using technology for infrastructure pain points. And the same can be said when you look at the capital deployment, where they rank third and fourth. But again, fintech comes in at second place, and food and beverage ranks first, albeit somewhat skewed by the Kotopi investment, taking up the largest percentage of the food and beverage space. And finally, when you look at the investor landscape for the Middle East, as I mentioned, more investors that have made investments in MENA-based startups than ever before, and we've only tracked 9 months of the year, likely to increase to year end, with the largest participation in absolute and percentage terms coming from international investors, showing the continued interest in the MENA region and the startups coming from the region than ever before. In fact, when you break down the headquarters of those investors, you can see that 20% of those investors are coming from the United States, and 40% are headquartered when you combine Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And finally, when you look at the exit evolution, this liquidity event of the number of companies that are either being merged or acquired, 2019 was the standout year of exits. And yet to date, we've already seen 23 different exit transactions take place from Q3 year to date. And we're likely to get very close to, if not actually surpass, the 2019 figure of exits that we've seen, showing again maturity of the ecosystem, the return on investments to those investors and the founders. And one of the key things that really drives is the so-called PayPal mafia, Careem mafia effect. I believe I heard a statistics that the Careem that was acquired by Uber has already seen 120 employees start companies as a result of leaving Careem from the post-acquisition era, showing the real value of the exit phenomena for the region. That's the end of the presentation. We have published several of these reports for Q3, 6 specifically with a geographical focus and 5 with an industry focus. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer any of them after the presentation. I look forward to hearing from Vikas and Tarek.
All right. Thank you very much, Philip. It's a pleasure to welcome Tarek Kabrit, who is the CEO, founder of Seez app. Tarek, before founding Seez, had a very wide-ranging career in consulting, banking, private equity, venture capital, and at some point sort of decided he wanted to become an entrepreneur. So spent prior to INSEAD, was at Booz consulting, went on to INSEAD, then joined the M&A team at Deutsche Bank, and from there went on to a fund called Siraj Capital, which was investing in SMEs in the Middle East. From there went on to Abraj, and then to WAMDA as a venture partner, and from there to Yasat, which is the satellite and aerospace division of Mubadala. So lots of experiences. Maybe before we jump into the discussion on Seez, Tarek, maybe it might be useful to just, at least for the audience, give us a little bit of a context. Tell us about Seez itself. What is the product? What's the service that you provide?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for that, because the idea behind Seez was really to use technology to improve and change the way people buy cars. So we feel the way people buy cars has been the same for the last 25, 30 years. So since the internet came about in the mid-90s, nothing really changed. You got the online classified, and you still buy the car the same way you did in 1995. You go on a classified, you find the seller, you call them up, you go see the car. So our vision was really to use technology to really change and improve the way people are buying these cars. We're a mobile app initially, and now we're evolved to become a platform for online car buying.
Great, thank you. So, I guess where I want to start is to think a little bit about this jump that you made from a lot of these other roles and corporate roles into Seez, and maybe kind of rewinding back to the long list of experiences that I talked about, Booz, Deutsche Bank, Siraj, Abraj. How did those experiences prepare you to become an entrepreneur? And what was it that kind of really drove you to make the leap to start Seez?
So first of all, nothing really prepares you to become an entrepreneur. It's no matter how much you think about it, how much you think you know, until you really do it, it's a totally different story. So having worked in VC and PE for a while, I thought I really had, a good understanding on how businesses work, what it takes to build a successful business, have a business that has barrier to entry, it's scalable, positive unit economics. It takes all the, the hypothetical, theoretical checklist. But then once you really go in, you realize there's a million other things that you have to learn on the fly. It's been definitely a big change for me. So coming from a corporate world where I spent, close to 20 years, it's a shifted mindset, shifted skill set that I had to go through. But it's exciting. It's exciting. It's the learnings you get are can be compared to anything else. The reason I made the jump is I've always been curious about starting my own business. I'm passionate about solving problems. I'm not really passionate about cars, so that was never the reason I got into that. I actually don't know much about cars. That's how it started. So the idea for Seez initially came about. I had gotten a job offer from Dubai and Abu Dhabi. I was preparing to move, and they were doing my security clearance, which took 6 months because I'm Lebanese. During that period, I was walking on the street. I saw a Mini Cooper. Once I got the offer, I sold my car, so I was without a car, canceled my rent. Then that period became 6 months. During that period, I was walking on the street. I saw a Mini Cooper, and I had always been curious about Mini Coopers. I felt maybe I should buy one, try it out for 2 months before I leave, get that experience. So I was with a friend of mine. We saw one on the street. I'm like, I'd like to buy a car like this one. How much does it cost? Like, I don't know. Like, which year is this one? Maybe I'll Google it. And he's like, I have no idea. And there should be an app where you can just snap a picture of a car, it tells you what the car is. You can search for similar cars, something like Shazam for cars. So I went back, Googled it. There was nothing like it. And that's where the initial idea for Seez came about.
So that was the initial seed of the idea, but then it took you a while to kind of get to the point where you said, okay, let me go out and do this, right? And at the time you were with Yasad and Mubadala, right? And so tell us about that, and kind of tell us about kind of what was going through your mind as you thought about, should I take the leap or should I stay Mubadala?
Sure. So there's always two lines of thinking and around starting something on the side. Some people say, don't do it. Leave, go full out because it'll never work out unless you're 100% in it. What's your plan B? I don't have a plan B. This is my plan B and A and B. And another line of thinking, goes around. It's okay. Start it on the side, having the cushion or the financial support from a full-time job will allow you actually to go a bit longer, will allow you to take the company a bit further before you need to raise outside money. I went with the latter option, so started it initially on the side. We needed quite a bit of AI capabilities when we first started, and it was very difficult 5 years ago to find that in Dubai. So we ended up bringing in 4 Danish engineers, machine learning guys. So we brought them in. I was funding everything myself at the time. They built the first version, and then we took it from there.
And you're not a tech guy, right? So how was that experience? I mean, did you feel like there was a big learning curve for you to get down in terms of your understanding of the technology and building an app?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still not fully a tech guy, so I haven't fully gotten the whole tech side of the business, but it's a very different skill set. I mean, my advice is, if you're building a tech product and you're not a tech founder, definitely bring someone early on that understands tech. I wouldn't even know how to hire a CTO, right? Like I can't judge, is he a good CTO or not? So bring someone you trust who understands tech. In my case, it was my co-founder. So we started with that, and there I started learning all the bits and pieces about tech. I'm still obviously not a tech guy. I spent my career in finance, but you get to a place where you can handle yourself, and then you have people around you that do understand tech, really that help you build that business.
You're not a tech guy, and you're not a car guy, but still, here you are.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, so you told the story about the Shazam for cars idea, and kind of look at where Seez is today. It's quite different. Maybe walk us through how the product evolved over time from those initial origins.
We first started as a Shazam for cars, And then it was a cool feature, but quickly we realized there is no business around snapping a picture of a car. You can't really build a business around it. So we realized that one of the gaps in the market was having an aggregation where you go to one place, you see all the cars in one place, sort of like what Trivago does for hotels. So we went in that direction, and then we wanted to take it a step further. We started creating some AI modules to really predict car prices, like some companies in the US, Kelly Blue Book, and these guys do. And then we want to take it a step further. We created a robot, a chatbot, that would actually send WhatsApp messages to the sellers of the car. So you go into one platform, you see all the cars from all the websites. In Dubai, it was 28 websites. You see all the cars from all the websites, you find the cars you like, and then you click on those cars, and a robot would send the WhatsApp message to the sellers of these cars and negotiate the price on your behalf. Check if the car has been in an accident, does it have a warranty. So it really does all the initial legwork for you. So from a user perspective, it was a great product. You don't have to go on 28 websites. You go into one place, you see everything. And then the robot does all the legwork for you and all of that. So the app did pretty well. Got to around 2.2, 2.3 million users, 25,000 reviews, 4.5 stars on the App Store, number 3, all of that. And then from a business perspective, we were still really struggling, like to really figure out how to make money on that. Most of the classifieds really make money by charging the seller to list with them. So they charge around $50, 200 dirhams here to list your car. And we didn't want to do that because we wanted to remain as a third-party impartial advisor to the buyer. So once someone pays you 200 dirhams to list their car, you can't turn around and say, oh, this car is crap, don't buy it, right? So because of that, we really struggled with the business model. Eventually, we realized that we were collecting more data than anyone else in the market. So all the supply was on our app. And then once you hit 2 million users, you really have a very good view on the demand side. So what we ended up doing is we created data analytics products that we were selling to the manufacturers, so the BMWs of the world and the Audis, and we could tell them some really deep insights around the supply, the demand, the gaps, the changes in prices.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot of this was, as you went along, these were opportunistic areas in which you moved into.
Absolutely.
And to what degree was that something that was driven by the product guys versus kind of what you were seeing in the marketplace? How did you kind of think about here's the product that we want to develop versus here's what the market is telling us, and how did you balance those?
So initially, we started off with the assumption saying, hey, if we solve a big problem for people to buy cars, it's such a high ticket item, we'll find a way to make money. So that was why we didn't worry too much about it initially, but we didn't end up finding a way to make money there. So we went down the data route. I'd like to tell you it was a very strategic, well thought decision. The truth is, we were in a meeting once with Audi, and we were trying to sell something else. And they're like, we have a lot of data. Do you mind sharing that with us? Like, okay. Like, can you structure it in this format? Can you do that? And I said, sure, we can try that. And then we were even thinking, how much do we even charge for that? We had a few VCs on our board, and I'm thinking, let's try $4,000. And then everybody on our board, like, no one would ever pay $4,000 for data per month, right? They're like, we give it a shot, see if they say yes. We gave it a shot. They said yes. And a year down the line, we were actually charging $16,000 a month for that same data. So when the product isn't there, it's really difficult to really price it, but you learn as you go along, and that's where we landed.
And what was the advice of your board at this time? I mean, it seems like you're going down a number of different routes. Yeah. Was this something where they said, okay, hold on, why are we've given you, in some cases you had investors that had given you money for an idea that you had sold to them, but how did they react?
They were actually quite supportive generally. So we weren't really changing directions into a silly thing. It was basically, you're in the market. A lot of the stuff we were doing was new to the industry. So really we were learning as we go along, and really trying to find opportunities and gaps that we can actually build on and really double down on. So from that perspective, the board was supportive. They saw the logic behind it, they saw the opportunity, and were supportive.
Okay. And so tell us about some of the other product areas that you moved into. I know that you've, so besides the online marketplace, the aggregation, you've also done some digital registration.
Yeah, so around a year and a half ago, because we became labeled as the data guys for cars, we got approached by the Dubai government. We wanted to launch a project where it's the world's first, Dubai loves world's first, so it was the world's first digital car registration over blockchain, and they wanted someone to help them build it. Given we had a really heavy tech team, so they brought us on and we helped them build it. So we actually launched that in GITEX last year, so exactly a year ago, where you can actually buy a car on our app. It's all over the blockchain. It gets registered. You literally register the car by looking at the phone. You just don't need an ID. You don't need to sign anything. Just look at the phone. The car is registered in your name. It's pretty cool. And that actually gave us a bit of street credibility in the whole SaaS side of the world. So prior to that, we were purely, consumer driven, doing consumer work. That started giving us a bit of credibility on the SaaS side of the business. COVID hit in March of last year. Our revenue dropped by around 84%. So all the car dealers paused all marketing spend, and we were really monetizing data. We had just closed our Series A, which was $6 million. So we had money in the account. Then we had to really, break or turn. We had to really step back and think, okay, what do we do next? Right? So there were two routes. So we could either hunker down, cut our costs, extend our runway, or we can really step back and think, okay, how's the world going to look like post-COVID? What are the opportunities that will come about after that? How can we really play a big part in that side? Some people on our board wanted the first one. We joked about it before, but they wouldn't push it hard, but basically they would send me these random WhatsApp messages around, oh, check out the startup, cut salaries by 50%. Oh, look at this company, they fired half of their people, whatever. But you didn't take the hint. I didn't take the hint. So we pushed on the other side of things, and we stepped back and we looked at the world, and we found one big trend happening, which was online car buying. It was booming all over the world. There's a company in the US called Carvana. For those of you who don't know them, it's a company that sells used cars online. It's 8-year-old. It's valued at $72 billion. It's actually the youngest Fortune 500 company ever. In Europe, the fastest unicorn ever is a company called Cazoo in the UK, online car buying. Same thing in Mexico, fastest unicorn called Kavak, online car buying. So we felt there's a big opportunity there. We wanted to move into that side of the business. The issue was to play a good part in that world. Most of these players actually own the cars. That's very capital intensive. So we started thinking of what ways can we really, how can we play a role in online car buying without really owning the cars. At the same time, all the car dealers were beginning to think digital. So their showrooms were shut down. So like, oh crap, now we can't sell any cars. What do we do? And we looked at both things, and then we decided to go with a direction whereby we help digitize the dealers. So basically we become sort of like a Shopify for car dealers. So we take them from offline and give them online buying e-commerce capabilities. And then once we have critical mass of some of the largest dealers connected to our pipeline backend, we take their cars and create an online buying marketplace with their cars. And this is what we're doing now. We started very randomly, but in Denmark. So we've signed up the top 3 dealers there, and we're launching the marketplace in 2 months.
And so now you have a B2C, you've got the B2B, and also things that you're doing with the government, so yeah. B2G. How is that mix? I mean, does it make it difficult to manage these very different sets of customers that you're dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. So at some point we were doing a lot of things, which now we had to really cut some of that fat off. But the interesting part is a lot of what we're doing started to tie up together, right? So as we were digitizing the dealers, which feeds into the marketplace automatically and gives us the cars, things like the registration project with the government connects perfectly with digitizing the dealer because they all need a registration side of the process. So it all started coming together as a one complete solution. We went through a period where we're doing a lot of weird random stuff, but right now I think we're well focused. We have a good strategy. We kept what we feel is useful to the grander vision that connects with all the other stuff.
Great. So let's maybe rewind. I want to talk a little bit about the funding story over time, right? And kind of gone through some rounds of venture capital funding. Prior to that, you were funding a lot of the development yourself. Maybe walk us through kind of the initial stages, right? So you decided to put up your own money for a while to fund the development of the app in its early stages. Can you walk us through kind of how that occurred? What was your thought process in going through, and personally, how did you feel about going through this kind of very risky process, putting up a lot of your own capital?
Yeah, sure. So initially, I started off by putting around $420,000 into the business, so a decent amount of cash. It was risky, but in my view, it was less risky than quitting my job and then going out with no means to really fund this. It allowed us to get the company to a stage where we could go out for venture capital money. So a lot of people, I talk to, I have this idea, we're building a product, can we go raise money for it? Yeah, sometimes yes. Most of the time you need to get your product and business to a stage where it's fundable or it's attractive enough. One mistake a lot of entrepreneurs do is they think only of growth. So they think, yeah, I want to get my business whereby it's, I have 50,000 users and growing at this level, whereby VCs will get excited. Often enough, VCs will get excited by your KPIs, right? So don't get to 50,000 users, get to 2,000 users, but make sure that you're tracking everything and you're really monitoring the key areas that actually matter. So what's the engagement of the app? How many of them are converting, all that. So if you go with a set of KPIs that's really, above market, above the average, that can be interesting enough for a VC fund. So after I funded the business with 420K, I felt it got to a place where we can approach some VCs. Having come from a VC PE world myself, it's never easy, but it was a bit easier than a normal entrepreneur. Like I knew how to structure the story, the deck, how to cover the key areas. So we went to a few VCs, got some traction. We ended up raising $2.8 million from a couple of VCs. It took us, to the next phase where we evolve the business around data and all of that. And then we wanted to raise another 3 million. Got a lot of interest. We got around 15 million committed. So we decided to take 6 instead of 3. Thank God we did that, because we closed our round in February 2020. And in March, the whole world collapsed. So we're really lucky to have $6 million in the bank. And that's what got us through COVID. Very recently, we closed another $5 million pre-Series B round. So far, we've raised around 14-15 million. And now we're gearing up for a Series B of around 25 million. The idea is to really use that to expand into Europe. We're looking at Denmark and Portugal as the next markets for our expansion. For a number of reasons, we picked those countries, but very luckily, we managed to partner with the largest dealer groups in each one of those countries. So we feel that us and those big dealer groups together create a really unique value proposition. So it almost becomes like a Carvana that's deconstructed.
And as you think back through the seed and Series A, were there any lessons learned as you think about the mix of investors that you brought on board, or the terms that those investors are putting on for their investments?
Yeah. So again, having come from PE and VC, I engineered the hell out of the round, and not in a good way. So a Series A took a year to close, which is not just long time. Most of the time, if a round takes this long, you effectively run out of cash towards the end. So that was also very stressful. The other thing that happens is you really grow a lot between the time you start the round and the time you close it. The valuation you choose is really a year old now, which is really undervalued. These are the negative sides of it. I literally wanted like an international VC, regional VCs, regional, automotive players, one from the UAE, but I wanted someone from Saudi as well. I didn't want to have anyone own more than 10% of the business, so I really engineered the heck out of it. Eventually, it ended up dragging and all that, but now looking back, I think it's a good thing that we did it that way. I don't know if I'll do it again that way, but looking at the board structure, looking how things are. We don't have someone that owns 30% of the business, has more control than we would like, and at the same time, we have multiple people who can help us in different areas.
But did you ever get to a point where you had differing views among the investors as to what direction you're going in? And did those views ever result in some sort of conflict that was difficult to resolve as you went along?
At some point, we had one of the strategics, which is basically someone in the auto space. They wanted to invest a big ticket. They wanted to own 25, 30% of the business. They came with a $10 million ticket. Funny story, at the time, we were generating around $280,000 in revenue. We were Dubai-based, so it's tax-free. And they came in with a tax due diligence team of 11 people from PwC to do tax DD on us for $280,000. So we went through all of that, and finished the DD, finished everything. They ended up changing some of the terms at the end. They wanted control over the board, they wanted veto and stuff like that, so we didn't agree with them. But it was a learning experience for us, probably also a learning experience for them. But we're happy with the direction we ended up taking. We're happy with the mix of VCs we got. Literally almost all of them topped up again in this pre-Series B round, which is always a good sign for startups. And now, we're they're helping support us for the next round.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about COVID. So you mentioned just a little bit the issue of COVID hit, right? And then we had this question of, well, where should we go, right? Should we reduce salaries? Should we fire people? Walk me through a little bit, kind of when you first recognized that this was going to be an issue, and kind of what was going through your mind when you realized that there was going to be a pandemic and things would change, at least for you, for industries in general, but also for yourself as an entrepreneur.
We realized pretty quickly, like literally within 2 weeks, 9 out of our 11 clients paused their contracts with us. So that was a big, fast slap. Then we started thinking, from a company building culture perspective. I also started thinking, we've spoke a lot about culture internally, how we want to support our team in different ways and all that. And really, a lot of people talk, but then when the time comes, they're like, okay, sorry guys, they cut their salaries by half and all that. I very consciously and proactively made sure we don't do that, and we support our team. So not letting them go in the middle of a pandemic where they can't find another job. We didn't even cut salaries. At some point, we had some of our team members come to me and say, by the way, if you want to cut my salary, I'm okay with it. I know it's tough times. So it was a really nice, period for us as a team, as we were getting used to this new normal. We had to think basically from a larger company perspective. As a startup, for big companies it makes sense. For startups, I felt if we really hunker down and cut our costs, a year passes and then we emerge. Yeah, we'll have a bit more money in the bank account, but then we haven't evolved, right? And probably we're going to need to raise a round very quickly after that. And what would we raise it on? Like, what's the story that we've done? Like, we haven't really evolved much. We haven't grown much. We haven't built anything new. Why would we, have a higher valuation? Like, and we obviously, no one wants to do a down round, right? You get lower valuation in your next round. So I felt, if we just really pause everything, it's just not going to do us any favors. We'll get to a place and then, the pandemic is over-ish. And then we need to go out and, tell a story, and we wouldn't have a real story. So I felt, honestly, that was literally the only option we could go with. Big companies can afford to cut salaries and do that because then, their business is there. Once the pandemic is over, they just pick it up from where it was. For startups, it's a different story.
And so, fortunately, you were well funded because I think you closed your round just a few weeks before the crisis hit. Did the board have any views on what you should be doing in terms of potentially reducing the burn rate or continuing?
Yeah, the board really wanted us to break. It was new to them as well, right? So it's not like they've been board members during pandemics before. So it was a big shock to them as well. They were learning what we should do. They were seeing all these companies cutting costs, companies going bankrupt, and they felt conserving cash is a smart strategy, and in a way it is. But eventually we decided to go that direction. They supported it. They saw the vision, and sometimes like some people say, if you get new information that impacts your business and you don't change what you're doing, then you're not a very intelligent person. And we felt we were getting a lot of information that affects our business, and we felt we really had to change what we're doing. Otherwise, we're really going to be irrelevant when COVID is over. So from a board perspective, other than the daily WhatsApp messages and articles that I was getting, they were okay. They understood what we're trying to do, although they were scared and they felt maybe we could cut more costs, but it was fine. All of that said, we obviously didn't keep spending on everything the same way we did. So we cut marketing by 70% because no one was buying cars anyway. But from other operating costs, salaries, and people, we actually tried to. We didn't even just maintain that. We actually grew our team quite sizably during the pandemic, especially on the tech and product side.
All right, thank you everybody, and thanks for joining us on this first ever hybrid webinar, and I think we'll leave it at that.